Welcome to the Lovecars On The Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiffany Dell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars On The Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. It was quite some weekend. There's a lot to get through, and without further ado, first and foremost, we're going to pay our deepest respects of the passing of Dieter Mateshitz, of course, the Red Bull founder, who did so much for motorsport, not just F1, but so much for motorsport all over the world.
What sport as well. I mean, incredible character. I mean, you know, he discovered this drink. Was it Thailand or Malaysia? I forget who this was.
It was Thailand. It was local delicacy.
Yeah, discovered it, rebranded it, marketed it, and just created this phenomenon. I mean, it's just... And you see, you know, extreme sports, you know, there's cyclists and trick cyclists with the Red Bull helmets on. There's been parachutists, and who's the guy that jumped from the space to make that long name, Baumgartner or something like that, wasn't it? And then football teams. He owned 4 football teams, the Red Bull juniors, you know, in motorbikes coming up to the ranks, supported youngsters. I think the great thing was the youth, you know, the number of skateboarders, you know, and windsurfers and everything. He backed so many people.
And of course, you're forgetting probably the most important, the Red Bull soapbox race all over the world. That's brilliant. That's one of my favorites.
I mean, I don't know whether he's got any children, actually. I'm not sure. He's very quiet. He was very backseat, never pushed himself out in the public. I mean, sadly, he was only 78 years old, you know, when he passed. But he was never sort of front of house, was he? Just discreetly. So I don't know whether he'll carry on this amazing tradition of supporting young sportsmen in every sport you can mention, I reckon.
There's lots of extreme sports. But yeah, I'm sure it will. I'm sure that legacy will continue. I'm sure he'll want it to continue.
Yeah. And of course, it's a shame that, you know, they won the constructors' title again.
I know,
on the day. I mean, so he dedicated that. Well, he knew it was coming. But yes, amazing man, and obviously, you know, it's a name that will be very much in the history books forever for the amount of sporting achievements and what he achieved with a little can, a little red and silver can.
Do you know what?
Blue and silver.
You got it right, yeah, blue and silver. Well, red and silver for the sugar-free one, which you never have. But you've kept him in business. You've made him a few quid with the amount of Red Bulls you drink on set. But it's amazing what marketing can do. That's all it was marketing, taking something from Thailand. But anyway, we pay our deepest condolences to him, and the Red Bull guys were clearly visually upset over the weekend, as you'd imagine. And so much so, actually, this whole drama, let's kick off straight away with that. The whole drama about the cost cap has been delayed now until Wednesday. It's got...
But the trouble is now, you know, this fact they don't come out with the facts, the fact that it was obviously when the teams agreed to this, they've agreed the way they would be punished. They've agreed this idea that if you keep it all stum, we'll all have a little chat behind doors, and if you admit you're guilty, you'll have a lower sentence. Now, obviously, Red Bull have been offered this lower sentence, whatever it is, but they won't announce it. And Christian Horner's now, you know, trying to. He doesn't want to admit guilt, does he, Christian? The one thing Christian Horner doesn't want to admit, so he's trying. But they had these meetings with Ben Sulayem. They were supposed to be on the Thursday, then it was on the Friday, and there were doing press conferences. Now, of course, they've delayed it for a week, you know, due to the death of Maastricht. So, you know, and then Horner's now coming out and saying the staff at the factory, their children are getting bullied at schools.
I don't believe it. I'm sorry, Christian Horner. I don't believe it.
He's calling it appalling allegations. Well, I mean, they have overspent their budget. So the fact that, you know, the people they're saying, you know, they're cheating. Well, however small the infringement, Christian, you've cheated. But he's almost implying that they haven't, and they're still going.
Hang on a minute, but it wasn't for performance enhancing stuff. It was just for extra staff rubbish. If you're spending over the budget, you're spending over the budget. I was a bit disappointed with Zach Brown, which was very clever of F1 to put them sat next to each other for the press conference. I thought that was very, very good, because of course Zach Brown sent the open letter saying that it's cheating, it constitutes as cheating. But I was a bit disappointed. He didn't really. He just soaked up the.
He backed off a bit. He backed off a bit. But I like the way he brought up the Colton Herter again, another FIA thing. He brought that up, you know, which I liked. You know, I mean, Colton doesn't drive for him and wasn't going to drive him in Formula One. So, but he pointed out another FIA that's still annoying me, to be honest, that Herter didn't get that spot. But then, of course, good news for Americans, because Logan Sargent has been named now as the Williams driver, which I think I was proactively encouraging as long as he wins the points.
I was going to say, it's not a done deal yet because of the super license.
I mean, he's fourth at the moment and he needs to finish fifth. And he has to hold. If someone takes him out at the first corner through no fault of his own, say he qualifies third, and he gets taken out at turn one, then what? They're not going to let him drive a Grand Prix car next year because someone else took him out. I mean,
but they can't. They won't be able to because
after not
they set a precedent.
No exceptions. I mean, it's just stupid to have no except. I know all the Twitters will go, a rule's a rule, because obviously they're so upset about previous rules that went against some of their favourite drivers. They're now insisting that every rule, but certain things like super license, granting a super license, must have panels that can say, okay, not quite got the right points, but quite obviously only wanted by his team. So good for Logan Sargent. Of course, he was out in FP1. A lot of new drivers of the FP1 at, where are we? Texas. What's the name of the women's track?
Circuit of Americas.
Austin, I was going to say. And they were all amazed. Theo Pourchaire was it? I don't know if you saw his interview after his drive. He was just... he was like a child that had been given his first go-kart drive. He was these cars are so incredible, the speed, and he's done Formula 2, so it is a big jump up for these kids. So Pourchaire was Alex Palou, of course, had a go in the McLaren and really impressed, which proved to the doubters that an IndyCar driver is good enough for Formula 1. It's not some second-rate formula. Robert Schwartzman, of course, had a go in the Ferrari, and who I wanted to see in the Haas. The only seat still left, assuming that Sargent gets his super points. But and Robert Schwartz did a good job in the Ferrari. I think he was quickest, but obviously had the quickest car of the four of them that had them. But still no Haas news. Still they're saying Schumacher or Hülkenberg, which neither choice inspires me. But I mean, I'd go to Hülkenberg. It has to be one of those two. Not Hülkenberg. I'd go with Schumacher, because he's done some good races recently, and I'd rather have a young driver in there than bringing someone back. However much I liked Hülkenberg, but I would rather have a third choice from somewhere, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
Yeah, me too. Giovinazzi, he didn't have the best of...
no, he was, of course, there was one more. Not quite young. I don't know how he got into, because there's supposed to be young drivers doing these FP1s. Quite how he got in, having done 2 seasons, didn't he?
Tiff, let's be fair. Yeah, he did.
Is that not a rule, FIA? Is that not a rule? I thought that was a rule. You have to have young drivers. But he dumped the car in the Haas. I think he's dumped his chances and dumped the Haas into the wall. And I wouldn't like to see him back either, I don't know. But
just leaving Formula 1. He's been there, done that. He's too old. Get the new ones in.
Get the new ones in. Before we go on to talk about the races, there are a couple of other bits of news. Oli Bearman, who I think is a very, very talented British driver. He lost out in the Autosports last year, back in doing them again this year. I thought he'd win it last year. Third in F3. They were going to do another season of F3, but now I think he's testing with
Prema.
And when he's with them in F3, they think he's that good. They're going to put him into F2, which I think is fantastic. We haven't got a front runner in F2 at all for British drivers. So really looking forward to seeing Oli Bearman up there doing that.
Yeah, me too. He came runner-up in F3 and could have technically won it still on the last race, couldn't he? But it was close stuff. So good. I'm glad he's there. Another
little news, the Formula Ford Festival. It was 50 years ago.
Hang on, what's the Formula Ford Festival? What's the Formula Ford?
It's the most epic Formula Ford that celebrated this great Formula. People like Michael Schumacher were doing the Formula Ford Festival. All sorts were in the middle of the Formula. Senna did the Formula Ford Festival.
Yeah.
And I did it 50 years ago. I was in the first one. We had 88 cars turned up, and I battled through to finish 7th in a massive 45-minute Formula Ford race. We had fuel tanks. We had to add fuel tanks. I had one over my knees with taps because the Formula Fords didn't have enough fuel. And, Stettin's a 2.7 mile track, the old original Stettin, fabulous racing circuit, brilliant track. And we had to add fuel tank, a little tap. So halfway through the race, I had to turn a little tap above my knees to fill up my fuel tank. Imagine health and safety.
Just crazy.
But it was an American kid that won. You've got the name.
Max.
I've written it.
Esterton.
So congratulations to Max, a talented young American driver that's come over here on scholarship from America. and he won the Formula 4. It was sad it was cut short due to the downpours that hit the south coast of England right at the end of the day.
Where was it? What track was it at?
Brands Hatch. Okay. Sadly, it's the Brands short circuit. It was at Snetterton until about 75, but the Snetterton track was cut in half, so that wasn't such a good race. Went to Brands Hatch, which, as you know, is not a good overtaking circuit. They should put it on the Grand Prix circuit.
Yeah, that'd be better.
Take it somewhere where more overtaking. It's very tough. A lot of pushing and shoving goes on because you can't overtake. But anyway,
you rely very heavily with Formula Ford. Like,
congratulations to Max. And may he have a great career. Maybe he'll be another American. Oli Bearman and the next British Formula One driver. Maybe Max will be the next American.
Okay, let's go to Formula One. Let's go to Circuit of Americas in Austin, Texas, and it was okay, wasn't it? Lots of the drivers love the circuit. Every single week they do Formula One. It's a record-breaking crowd every single week. It's that. How can it be every record?
They didn't give the weekend. I always want the Sunday only figure. I saw something flash up on the screen. 444,000. That's the same 200,000 2 days. I don't know how many. I'd love to know the actual. It's like football. The audience on the day, and we need more of that in Formula One. Let's have the number. But it was a cracker. There were lots of events. But the funny thing is this American domination, American taking over Netflix, and the Americans loving it, and all the razzmatazz, flipping. And we had Ricardo on a horse, cowboy horse, the Haas drivers dressed up in cowboy suits and stunts and celebrities everywhere you can look.
Brad Pitt.
But funny enough, the race was made exciting by this move as we're slowly going to copying American racing with yellow flags. As soon as anyone's the gravel trap, it's full course. And I think after Japan with the rescue trucks, this is the way Formula One is going. And I love it in a way because, Formula One always poo-pooed American racing, IndyCar racing, these ridiculous, safety car comes out and you drop a paper bag on the track, But of course it created dramatic racing, which the Americans love. So lo and behold, their American Grand Prix ended up being exciting and dramatic because the pace car came out immediately. It's just Bottas in the gravel, it wasn't a serious shunt. But then, of course, we had the very serious shunt when young Lance Stroll decided on weaving as his new teammate was going overtake. Outrageous by Lance. He's been given a 3-point penalty for next grid place, which isn't enough. It was a horrendous move. You can't sit in your mirrors and as someone's moving, move. You've just got to stamp down on it. But
especially, so they're doing 180 miles an hour, for those of you that didn't see it, 180 miles an hour, and it literally launched Alonso into the air. Pulled a wheelie for about 50, 60 feet.
Terrifying. It could have been terrifying. It could have been a
See, this is the thing. The FIA, it's about consistency. We've always said that. And in my opinion, if something bad happened to Alonso, which it could have very easily, it's just a few centimeters here and there difference would have been a different story, then I think they would have come down on him like a ton of bricks. But because Alonso fell to last place, he did a wheelie, he landed, smashing the car up, went into the barriers, went to last place. Because Alonso, amazingly, at 180 miles did all that, finished 7th place. It's just, I think...
Sadly, he did in the end. Late last night, Haas protested because Haas have been pissed off because they've black flagged Magnussen 3 occasions for having a bit of a end plate flapping. And so Haas is saying, look, FIA, if you're going to be petty about our wings, which we told you they're fine, they can flap a bit when they're half broken. They then protested Perez for losing a wing plate and Haas for losing a wing mirror with Alonso. But I think Red Bull had managed to persuade them during the race that the wing end plate being broken didn't affect the stability of the whole wing. So let Perez race on with a damaged car. Alonso, they gave him a 30-second penalty because they said, he should have been black flag, which should have been a stop-go in the pits. So in fact, but anyway, going back before we go back to the race itself, but just to talk about the way it's going America's way, is that even Martin Brundle then he used this old quote, but instead of saying the classic quote, which yellows breed yellows, which is what Americans have said for years, he said, the old phrase, safety cars breed safety cars. have you ever heard that?
No, I've never heard that.
They refuse to use American. It's like when they called it a safety car instead of a pace car. When we first bought safety cars, it must be about 20 years ago now, I don't know when they started, because they wouldn't use the American pace car word because they hated them implying that we're copying anything American. So instead of using the yellows breed yellows, Martin said, of course, safety cars breed. But so those two safety cars, and I think this will be the future of Formula One now. I think we're just going to go, instead of all these virtual safety cars and yellow flags, we're going to go more and more the American way and just say straight away, cars in the gravel, safety car.
It did make it exciting, but what I don't like about that is you need a bit of luck, because if you've just pitted and then something happens, that's what frustrates me a little bit. And then everyone comes in for their cheap pit stop. So it's exciting in a way, because then it mixes the whole field up. But
the way to go, but the next way, the American way, is then you have this. You're not allowed to pit, and everybody comes in at the same time once the pit lane's open. But of course, Formula One, they don't have two pit stalls. They don't have a pit stall for each car. So that couldn't. Anyway, lots of stuff. And of course, the other thing that made a good race was Red Bull's mechanics finally clocking up. How many times have we hoped that Max would maybe have a small problem in the pits to make a race of it? And this time it did, and it certainly made a race of it. So thanks for the front left wheel. I know you're a bit embarrassed, some of you, for having it was your drill's fault. Your wheel gun failed you, but it made a very exciting race.
It did. And then all of a sudden, because then Lewis was putting in some really strong laps, and I'm thinking, yes, this is Lewis is going to do it. And I said yes, and I said that quite excitedly because I'm a Lewis fan, but also that record is going to go where every year since 1997, either Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher have won a race, and that was the only chance I saw yesterday of that. Still, that
is
record.
That true? Since '97,
incredible. Either Michael Schumacher or Lewis Hamilton have won a race.
Has won a race,
which is just some record. And I thought yesterday it's going to go, because he was putting in some really good times, purple sectors, and all of a sudden.
I thought he was ahead enough on the lap that he did get overtaken, because the silly thing about the DRS is that the one problem with the American circuit is there is that amazing series of high-speed corners which the drivers love, where however good the new rules are, you just really can't follow close. And I thought his lead was big enough. Once that Red Bull got its wings open and the extra straight line speed, it was incredible where he came from.
Well, Andrew Benson writes for the BBC. He's a very knowledgeable guy, but he said Max Verstappen was just too fast for Lewis Hamilton. No, he wasn't, Andrew. No,
the Red Bull was too fast
for the Mercedes.
Yeah, it's just a straight line.
It's a silly thing to say for somebody so good as him.
Yeah. They're both brilliant drivers. I mean, they gave everything. It was good. And it was amazing. It was a bit sad the way the Ferrari fell away, Leclerc, and he just dropped back. I thought he would hold Schumacher. I kept saying Schumacher. He would hold up Verstappen for longer than he did. Verstappen dealt with the Ferrari. In fact, Perez nearly caught the Ferrari at the end.
But Perez, I was going to say, Perez again, he's just not. He's not there again, is he? He's so far off the pace with his. I would get rid of Perez personally. I've said this many times. I would get rid of Perez.
But there's not an obvious substitute. That's the trouble. I agree. But it's not an obvious.
I mean, the next Max somewhere.
Well, I would get Lando. I'd go buy Lando for £10 billion, whatever it costs. Buy Lando. That's the answer. But qualifying, of course, it was all a bit mixed up. We had another lot of penalties, didn't we? We had Perez went back a few, and of course Leclerc went to the back almost. So we had yet another weird-looking grid. Now, what did you think of the George attack? I don't know. You think that was a slam dunk penalty?
Well, I think the problem is you always see with racing situations like that, you got completely different opinions, and you see limited bit of data. But how did you see it, Tiff?
Well, I think that obviously it was George's fault, but what actually caught him out slightly was that Carlos decided to cut back. So he followed Verstappen into his gearbox. He then pulled nearer George, because he pulled to come left and tried to go the other side of. I think that sort of just put George in an impossible position, But it's such a tight corner. That corner is so tight. They take it quite quick.
It is, and also in racing, it's your first corner. So it's the end of the straight. It's not like any other corner where you know exactly where the braking zone is, because you're fluctuating.
It's so wide as well. It's so wide,
and your speed's different because you're starting off in first gear, obviously second gear. But I felt so sorry for Carlos Sainz. I felt so sorry for him, getting pole position and just poor lad. He's such a good lad as well. But
he was on the pace.
Who else? Who standout drivers for you for the weekend? Max masterclass again.
There was a lot going on. I mean, Lando battled back. That was the front four Perez again catching up. If Red Bull are going to consistently win, he's got to be second and not fourth. George coming another fifth, never on the pace all weekend. He had a scary moment. Was that ever filmed? I don't know what he talked about. FP1, he had a scary moment. I don't know where it was. And
they all had moments.
He lost faith in nothing. He lost trust in his car.
Had moments. Lewis had moments as well.
Yeah, he didn't have a good weekend really, George. Although he came fifth.
It's funny with that head to head, because Lewis is clearly the better driver. You can.
I think earlier on I thought George was going to be closer, but he's just faded. He's sort of he's 0.2 instead of 1/10 slower at the moment, isn't he? So close. But I'm sure George, with experience of a better car, would be closer. But yeah, I think Lewis has come back in the second half of this season brilliantly. So we had that great battle. Well, Fernando obviously was a great driver, but then he's got pushed back. There was that fabulous last lap battle, which was Sebastian Vettel and K-Mag. K-Mag was trying to go with only one stop. His tyres were shot. It was a fabulous last lap defence, but Sebastian, despite about to be retired, they were like Formula Ford Festival kids on that last lap. But Vettel eventually got by to steal 7th, which is now 6th for K-Mag. Yuki came home and got 10th. He had a reasonable race. So who's inherited the last point? So Ocon had a weird weekend, didn't he? He just didn't qualify in Q1. Had to come from the back. Never seemed to really catch up that quickly. He's a funny. I'm never sure about Ocon whether he's. It's going to be interesting to see when Gasly comes in.
Gasly will school Ocon. There's no question in my mind. That's a good matchup with those two, actually. Yeah, French team, French everything. But I think Gasly will. He's far more consistent, and I think he's got much more pace.
But it was a spectacular Grand Prix. And that midfield battle, they were running about 4 in a row, weren't there? With 2 Alfa Tauris and Bottas. And there was plenty of action going on to entertain the Americans. They had their pace cars, 2 restarts. Safety cars. I'm getting it wrong now. Safety cars.
Safety cars breed safety cars. You heard it.
That's the word. Yeah, you heard it. So yeah, an entertaining American Grand Prix, I reckon.
Okay, before we move on, let's just quickly. Jess Hawkins did an interview. I don't know whether you saw it with Ted, and saying about W Series. And Jess was really disappointed, quite vocal about how disappointing it is that there's no females in Formula One. Now I know it's hard that he's thrusting the microphone in her face and putting her on the spot, but that's not the way it is. It's on ability. It's not. And she was quite right, but she did sort of retract and go back and say that hopefully we can encourage, whether it's through W Series, because Formula One now talking about having a series included through them, which is great. And she said, but hopefully we can encourage the next generation of females come through, which we've always said that is
I know. I mean, this is word, because Lewis has come out as well saying it's a shame that women aren't represented. This is the current word, represented in Formula One. And someone else I read a story as well use that same word. It's almost like saying, it sort of said, well, women watch Formula One, or young girls watch Formula One, and there's no women in it. They won't be interested in doing it. So she said, okay, so we'll put a woman in Formula One to represent you, and she'll always be at the back of the field. Now, is that a good idea? So all these young girls are going to see the one woman that you're pushing into Formula One without sufficient talent to be there. That's almost what they're asking to be done. And that won't work. They'll look worse, because the jokes will be, look at the girl at the back, look at the girl at the back,
It's all about equality, and everybody shouts and screams about equality. But it's not equal, because they've had the most incredible 2.5 years, these girls. And you've got unbelievably talented drivers that cannot race because they haven't got the sponsorship or they haven't got the opportunity. No. These girls are flying all over the world, getting paid. Jamie Chadwick, $1.5 million. And
she's got a wealthy family as well. I know. Whereas young kids' dads are mortgaging their houses for the boy. I mean, I actually like the FIA though. I think that's what they're going to do. I really like the 16-year-olds in Formula 4 cars. Because I said the time with W Series, it's almost sort of implying that you're good enough if you win that to be in Formula One, because it's a bigger series. But whereas if you go back to 16-year-olds and get them all buzzing around in Formula 4 cars, then we might find the Maxime Verstappen and the young girl that's got that talent. But I mean, there aren't many in karting yet that are winning karting. So I mean, that's where all the kids come from. They've won world championships, these kids that come at Oli Bearman and that sort of the ilk. Yeah, there's no young girls. You've got to get them into karts at 8.
Which I hopefully they are. Hopefully they're doing, and they are focused on doing that. And we've always said that from day one. We've always supported it. We've always said that hopefully they do that. And lastly on that subject, did you know that W Series was the most watched female sport on Sky Sports? Isn't that incredible?
Says who?
Says Jess Hawkins.
I mean, most W Series races go out at 7 o'clock in the morning and nobody sees them. There's no crowd in the grandstands when they're watching it.
That's what Jess Hawkins says. So, and so I'm sure that's a stat that she's
I've never been. It's like 444,000 people watch the American Grand Prix. No, they're on the 3 days. Maybe W Series sells its television to China or something. They've ended up the entire population of China watch W Series. Who knows? But I never believe any of those stats.
So the more these ladies can do in sport, the better in motorsport. But it's not. It doesn't mean because they're doing W Series they should be driving in Formula One cars. That's not how it works. That's. I guess that's the confusion.
Let's get Formula 4 champion, then buy them a driving Formula 3, the winner of the championship. Buy them a driving Formula 3. Make them go up the ladder.
Talk to me about WRC, because that wasn't very exciting. I need to blow my nose. You talk about WRC.
Well, I know it's a very amazingly drama-free World Rally Championship. We didn't lose anyone for the first day. Unfortunately, Gus Greensmith was anyone to finally ruin the reliability run when he crashed hit the barriers hard as Ford. It was exciting out front because Sebastian Ogier, who does occasional drives with Toyota, came out. And the 8th-time champion gave a bit of a lesson to the new Calais Rovanperä, the new kid on the block, edged out into a lead slowly over the first 2 days. But in fact, Calais didn't even finish second. A lot of punctures came towards the end, a lot of tyre troubles, people come out understeer. So Thierry Neuville actually came through in the Hyundai to finish second, gradually caught Rovanperä, was probably the quickest driver on the last day. But Ogier got into trouble. Oh, again, boring. He did some donuts. He drove into the podium arena, which had a ramp to drive up on. Huge arena. All the crowd had railings. They were well away from the middle. Accelerated into this area, did 2 donuts, and perfectly timed the last donut to drive up the ramp at 3 miles an hour. Oh, he's been sanctioned and fined and given a bollocking. They even I've read the report this morning. They've quoted FIA rule F1 6B, C, D, 4. Oh, and apparently they do now have, I forgot what the word, like demonstration areas. It wasn't a designated acrobatics arena. They apparently have certain areas where you're allowed to do, flipping hellfire. Anyway, so Thierry Neuville got to
I've
second.
seen a certain Tiff Needell do that at Thruxton.
Exactly, in trouble, yeah.
When you go in.
I know, I'm in a car park. Ott Tanak came fourth in the second of the Hyundais. And Ott Tanak's leaving Hyundai. He had a bit of trouble this year with bad reliability. He slagged the team off a couple of times. The former world champion, where he's going, whether he's going to get a Ford or not. Ford had another terrible rally, not just because Gus crashed, but Craig Breen had a puncture. And they were in the bottom of the 10 finishers. So the amazing thing about the World Rally was that there wasn't very little drama. Amazing high-speed run out front, good battle out front, but no real big dramas.
Okay.
Whereas MotoGP,
there's never a dull moment in MotoGP.
Oh dear. Another leader crashed. MotoGP, Jorge Martin out front of Ducati, trying to build a lead. And so many we saw in. Now they have so many more onboard cameras as well. You just see the guy leaning in. He's got it up, and then just the front folds from underneath them, and they just trail the brake in. There's a big, it's out in Malaysia. It's a good track, that as well. So Francesco Bagnaia has another win, is now looking like he's pretty much going to win. Can't mathematically win. It's one more round to go. He had an amazing battle out front, though, with Enea Bastianini, who's going to be his teammate next year. And he's in one of the private Ducatis. So you kept on thinking they'd throw team orders at him. You're going to be driving for us next year. Stop battling with our championship. But they put on a great show out front. And Fabio Quartararo, the almost outgoing champion, the French boy, his poor old Yamaha, it's just not quick enough. But he just rode his life and got to third, got the podium. So he still mathematically can win. But he's 23 points down with just one race to go in Valencia. But entertaining. Moto2, if you didn't watch this was the shock of the weekend, because the Japanese guy, Ayo Ogura, has got into the championship lead narrowly from Augusto Fernandez. Because Fernandez, the last round, while running third, dropped it. He was the championship leader. He dropped it. So Ogura got into the championship lead with 2 rounds to go. He was over this incredible battle out front with Tony Arbolino, the Italian. But Fernandez was down at about 6th. And you're thinking, right, he's leading the championship. He'll obviously take it steady and he'll finish second, even though they swapped lead a couple of times. Last lap, he takes this outrageous lunge halfway round down the inside of Arbolino, and the front folds under him and down he goes. Didn't finish. So, instead of having a 20-point lead going to Valencia for the last round, he's now, I don't know how many points down, 16 points behind Fernandez. So it's just incredible. I mean, the commentators, he's known as quite a level-headed Japanese rider, Ogura, but it was just unbelievable what happened when you go for a championship. But the commentators were saying it's amazing how, it gets in your head, you want every point you can have, and he just got carried away.
Yeah.
But Jake Dixon, our British rider, had another good run, qualified 4th, I think, finished 3rd, another solid. He always drops back at the beginning. He sort of doesn't push early on. And I think his tactic is he'll have more tyres at the end. So he doesn't want to rip his tyres up early on. And he came back to finish 3rd. Would have been 4th, but inherited the podium, and Ogura went down. And so, unfortunately, Sam Lowe's, our other British rider, didn't start. He had another crash in qualifying. He's got this shoulder problem. It's not fully fixed. And he just hasn't got the strength. He says he's all signed up for next year. I was surprised. He had a miserable season with so many retirements. But apparently, I don't know if it's the same team or not, but at least Sam Lowe's will be back next year. But the story for British riders was the Moto3, where we had a stunning win. Scott John McPhee, he's been doing Moto3 since it began, all 10 seasons. He was actually in the 3rd division, which was 125. So he actually 125cc World Championship for a year. So he's raced so hard for so many years, always gives 100%, heart on his sleeve, amazing rider. This is only his 4th win. And this season's his last. He's definitely out of Moto3 this season. But early on, he broke his back in a shunt, did a vertebrae, had to be out for 4 or 5 or 6. I don't know how many meetings he was out for. Terrible season. Has been fighting back, slowly getting more competitive. But he qualified 22nd. Apparently, he said he wanted to go home halfway through. But apparently, on the morning of the race, they changed all the settings. And he came through battling up. Now, the last lap, he was up to 5th. And it was this amazing battle, 6 of them in the front group. Fantastic battle. But going, I don't know if you know Malaysia circuit, the sort of 3 corners from the end, there's an amazing downhill left-right S into a tightening corner that goes on to the big long straight before the final bend. And the 4 up front were both 2 by 2, side by side, holding each other, all just battling, these young kids. And old John, with his wise head, he's been battling these children for 10 years, with his 3 wins up until now. And into the tight penultimate corner, the 4 ahead of him all went wide, trying to outdo each other. So he just tucked inside and led onto the straight down towards the final corner, weaving around. But then his teammate overtook him, outbraked him going into the final corner. And again, he just backed off a bit, did that. I'm not going to use that word. Did the cutback.
Why not?
The word that a certain Formula One commentator keeps using. And there's now a Twitter fan out and to kill him every time he uses the switcheroo. It was driving you mad, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, stop using it, Crofty. The switcheroo. Everybody hates it. Anyway, so he did a brilliant cutback and crossed the line to win. He was so emotional. His wife was, the fiance was there.
Brilliant.
Obviously, it's his penultimate Moto3. He doesn't know what he's doing next year. He can't get a Moto2 ride. He's talking about super sports, which supports superbikes. So really emotional, fantastic win. Everybody in tears for John McPhee.
Brilliant.
So always drama, which goes to superbikes, of course, is the other thing going on in Argentina. 2 wins for Batista, who looks like he's going to win that. Ducati looks like they're going to win World MotoGP and World Superbikes. 1 win for Razgatlioglu, but the British boy Jonathan Rea just had 3 podiums. But again, those 3 dominated all the podiums. I think Razgatlioglu missed 1 podium by having a shunt in the second race, dropped it. So yeah, not that close. World Superbikes.
They're dangerous. These bikes are dangerous. I was on a bike for the first time on Monday, as you know, last week, doing a bit of off-road.
Playing in the mud.
I think I've got a fracture in my. I must go to the hospital. I think I got a fracture in my arm. It's so painful.
Did you have a big shunt or what?
No, I was just going over the whoop things and bumps and stuff.
It'll be a torn ligament. Probably.
I've got old brittle bones at my age. Not quite as old and brittle as yours, but I've still got.
Oh God! Don't you start!
Old brittle bones. I should have prepared a little bit more. Right, let's go across the pond to NASCAR because
NASCAR.
It was a race. It was the last 8, closing in on that last 4 places that we've been talking about over the last few weeks, and it was dominated by someone number 5, Kyle.
He's back. Kyle's back. Kyle's back. He's had a very poor mid-season. Beginning of the year looked like he might. He's the champion, reigning champion. He might dominate another season, but he's off the pace. The Chevrolets have had a bad season, really, even though 3 of them were in the shootouts, the playoffs. But yeah, he was absolutely. It's a circuit he's always loved in the past, Miami. It's one where he follows the wall at 150, 60 miles an hour, this far off it all the time. Occasionally touches it, doesn't mind touching it. But in the past, he's touched it so often that he's broken his car. He's never won it, but he's always been the quickest around this track. And he's just got this. I don't know what you're supposed to look well ahead, but he's got the wall like 2 inches away. Because when you're following a line like a wall, it's hard. There's nothing obvious in a curve to sort of follow. But he's got this talent. But of course, sadly, because he hit the wall at the Roval and damaged his suspension, he dropped out of the top 8, so he didn't make the final 8. So he's not going to be in the final 4 that can go to win the title in 2 races' time. So we've now got the final 8 going into one more race at Martinsville, where already Joey Logano is through to the final 4 because he won a race. There were 2 riders who were trying to win the race. I think came 2nd or 3rd, wasn't it? Ross Chastain, he nearly won, but Kyle was too good for him. So they go into this final Martinsville, where obviously if you win, you jump the people that are in the points. So at the moment in the points are Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott and William Byron. But anyone can catch. Denny Hamlin's 11 spots outside the cut line. And if anyone wins the race at Martinsville, jumps the points people, so you get straight through. So it's a win or bust. But even the point, Martinsville is half-mile oval with 40 cars banging fenders non-stop. So every place you gain a point. So it's still incredibly tight as we go and see who gets through to the final 4. So only 2 more races to go of NASCAR.
Thank goodness for that.
The one Martinsville where we'll finally cut it from 8 down to 4. Then only one of those 4, whoever wins the highest place in the final round will be the champion. So, okay, but it was it wasn't that much exciting. It was a steady race because Larson just dominated. Great battle.
Steady race in NASCAR means it was a snooze fest.
A great run. No, because Ross Chastain and Allmendinger had an amazing battle for second that was worrying us all the way through.
So one thing last week was the Bubba and Carl incident where Bubba looked like he used his car as a weapon. And the same happened over in Hockenheim, actually, the Masters GP. Did you see that, Tiff? Where,
I was tweeting. Yeah, I mean, that, getting Lance Stroll getting a 3-place grid position for moving at 200 miles an hour. And this DTM, I've been tweeting about DTM for a while, because almost every week there's been these horror crashes with because track limits, they just don't seem to care. The German authorities don't seem to care. They seem to allow the drivers to just, launch down the outside, go off into the runoff area, come back with extra speed, and they bash into they push back into the crowd. But yeah, you mean the one where the Lamborghini pushed the Porsche off?
Quite.
I don't even know. I tweeted about it saying I don't know what happened after. I don't know whether that Lamborghini driver was in any way penalised for that move, but he just kept on moving and moving until the Porsche was 4 wheels on the grass.
Thing is, you're in a car like that, a closed car, and people feel invincible because the safety is incredible and you're cocooned in there, but you can't be using your car. I'm not suggesting they did, but I didn't see it fully. But
one of the DTM drivers has got a broken pelvis or something. He's missing a race from that previous. And I watched the stock car. They're actually called stock cars. And it's a good touring car form. The Brazilian, there was another tweet came out. And again, it was due to track limits. They all 3 of them went off on the runoff. And then they, when they come back on, the rule is, as I tweeted, if you go off the track, you must return in a safe manner. Yeah. They don't now. They use the runoffs and they just go back on the track.
With extra speed.
Yeah, if there's a car there, they just hit it. Yeah. I'm coming back, Yeah. And they had a huge shunt because they're just hitting each other. And it's a terrible example we're setting. For people just using their cars as a weapon. I mean, I still blame Senna in a way. This is why I've always slightly not been the ultimate Senna fan. Mercurial talent though he was the one that began this moving over on straights, squeezing Alan Prost into the wall in Portugal, began that whole animosity. And this squeezing off the road has to stop. I mean, it shouldn't be a car's width. It should be a car and a half's width or something. I think, Senna said, well, I gave him a car's width, a millimetre each side, It's terrible. Yeah. And it's a bad disease that spreads through all motorsport. I mean, I was criticising the World Touring Cars last week, saying TCR, the format is not big enough to be a proper world championship. And there, they love the racing. But again, it's just contact sport, because they're all little front-wheel drive hot hatches and they're just moving into each other.
Okay, right.
So we're ending on a bit of a downer.
We don't need to be, because it's a brilliant weekend of motorsport. Congratulations to Red Bull. Obviously, our condolences to Dieter as well. And next week, we've got the Mexico Grand Prix, Arriba. And we have, what else is happening? NASCAR.
Well, NASCAR, the penultimate round at Martinsville. There'll be door banging.
Can't wait for that.
Sure.
Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.
Cheers.
See you.